The ultimatum that made humans smile, the observation deck of the Human Research Station Pathfinder 7, offered a breathtaking view of Kepler 442b's twin moons. Dr. Elena Vasquez stood at the reinforced window, watching the larger moon rise over the planet's purple-tinged horizon. She had been assigned to this distant colony for 3 years now, studying the unique crystalline formations that covered much of the planet's surface. It was peaceful work, far from Earth's bustling cities and political complexities. That peace ended the moment the sky tore open. The arrival of the Imperium. A massive vessel emerged from what appeared to be folded space itself, reality rippling like disturbed water as the ship materialized. Elena's coffee mug slipped from her fingers, forgotten as she stared at the impossible structure now hanging in orbit. The ship was enormous, easily 20 kilometers from bow to stern, its hull a dark metallic purple that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Spines and protrusions jutted from its surface in geometric patterns that hurt to look at too long. Within minutes, every communication device in the colony screamed to life. The message was simple and delivered in flawless English, along with every other human language simultaneously. Attention, human colony. You will send your leadership to our vessel immediately. Resistance is futile. Compliance is mandatory. You have 2 of your hours to respond. Elena watched as emergency protocols activated throughout the station. She had always wondered what humanity would do if we finally met alien life. She never imagined it would be like this. Governor Marcus Webb was already in motion, his administrative training kicking in instantly. He was a tall man in his 50s with silver hair and the kind of calm demeanor that came from decades of crisis management. He had governed 3 different colonies before Kepler 442b, always volunteering for the frontier assignments that other administrators avoided. The diplomatic team assembles. Marcus gathered his small council in the station's command center. Besides Elena, there was Chief Engineer David Kumar, a brilliant man who could fix anything with spare parts and determination. Security Director Hannah O'Brien, a former Earth Defense Force officer who had retired to colony life but never lost her military edge. And finally, Dr. Yuki Tanaka, the colony's xenobiologist who had spent her entire career preparing for this exact moment, though she never truly believed it would happen. Well, Marcus said, looking at each of them in turn, I suppose we always knew this day might come. Earth Command has been warning us for decades that we're probably not alone out here. He pulled up a holographic display showing the alien vessel. The question is, how do we handle first contact when it comes with a gun pointed at our heads? Hannah leaned forward, her tactical mind already analyzing possibilities. We go, we talk. We buy time. Earth needs to know about this, and every minute we keep them talking is a minute for our people to prepare. She paused, a slight smile crossing her face. Besides, I'm curious. You don't build a ship that big just to say hello? The shuttle ride to the alien vessel was tense and silent. Marcus had insisted on bringing the entire council, reasoning that if this went badly, losing leadership wouldn't matter anyway. If it went well, having diverse perspectives might prove valuable. As they approached the massive ship, a bay door opened, large enough to swallow their entire shuttle without touching the sides. Inside the Eternal Conquest, the interior of the alien ship was designed to overwhelm. Corridors stretched in impossible directions, walls covered in glowing symbols that seemed to shift and change when you looked directly at them. Their escort was a squad of Vakroth warriors, each standing nearly 4 meters tall, covered in segmented armor that looked organic and mechanical at once. They moved with predatory grace, never making a sound despite their size. The humans were led to a chamber so vast it created its own weather system. Clouds actually formed near the ceiling, 100 meters above their heads. At the far end, on a raised platform that required climbing 40 steps, sat Commander Thelvan. He was larger than his warriors, his armor more ornate, covered in symbols that Elena's translator implant couldn't even begin to process. Humans. Thelvan's voice boomed through the chamber, enhanced by technology that made it seem to come from everywhere at once. You stand before the Vakroth Imperium, rulers of 50,000 worlds, masters of this galaxy for 8,000 of your years. We have come to offer you a choice, though it is not truly a choice at all. Marcus climbed the steps slowly, his team following. When he reached the platform, he was still barely at eye level with Thelvan's chest. He looked up at the alien commander without fear. We're listening. The standard ultimatum. Thelvan gestured, and holographic images filled the air around them. Worlds burning, fleets of ships in battle, civilizations crumbling. This is the fate of those who resist the Imperium. We are inevitable. We are eternal. Every species we encounter makes the same calculation. They measure their weapons against ours. They count their ships against our fleets. They always reach the same conclusion. He leaned forward, his eyes, three of them arranged in a triangle on his face, fixed on Marcus. Surrender is survival. Resistance is extinction. The terms were delivered with mechanical precision. Humanity would provide 30% of all resources to the Imperium. Humanity would supply soldiers for the Imperium's armies. Humanity would adopt Vakroth as the official language. Humanity would accept Imperium governors on all worlds. Humanity would abandon all weapons research and development. Humanity would, in essence, cease to be free. You have 14 of your days to signal your acceptance, Thelvan concluded. This is more generous than we usually offer. Your species interests us. You have spread to 17 worlds in only 2 centuries. You show potential as servants of the Imperium. There was a moment of silence. Marcus looked at his team. Elena saw David's jaw clench. Hannah's eyes had gone cold and calculating. Yuki was actually taking notes, her scientific mind unable to stop analyzing even in this moment. Then Marcus did something that changed everything. He laughed, the laughter that shook an empire. It started as a small chuckle, but it grew. David joined in next, then Hannah, her laugh sharp and bright. Even Yuki couldn't help the smile that spread across her face. The humans stood before the most powerful military force in the galaxy and laughed like they had just heard the funniest joke of their lives. Thelvan's 3 eyes widened. His warriors shifted, hands moving toward weapons they had not thought they would need. In 8,000 years and 50,000 conquests, no species had ever laughed at the Imperium's ultimatum. There had been tears, rage, resignation, even desperate attacks. Never laughter. You find your extinction amusing? Thelvan's voice dropped to a dangerous rumble. Marcus wiped his eyes, composing himself with effort. I'm sorry, Commander. It's just that you sound exactly like Napoleon, or Alexander the Great, or the Third Reich, or the Corporate Consortium, or about 15 other groups from our history who said the exact same things. He smiled, but there was steel in his eyes now. They were all very confident, too. These are names of your conquered peoples? Thelvan asked. Those who learned the futility of resistance? Actually, David said, stepping forward, they were the conquerors. Or they tried to be. Napoleon controlled most of Europe. Alexander reached India. The Third Reich nearly took the entire European continent. The Corporate Consortium owned half of Earth's economy. He paused. They're all gone now. Footnotes in history books and cautionary tales we tell our children. The history lesson. Alina found her voice, the scientist in her unable to resist sharing data. Humanity has existed for roughly 300,000 years, Commander. In that time, we've survived 5 mass extinction events on our homeworld. Ice ages that covered continents in kilometers of ice. Volcanic eruptions that blotted out the sun for years. Plagues that killed half our population. Asteroid impacts. Nuclear wars. Climate collapse. Artificial intelligence rebellions. Nanotechnology disasters. She looked directly at Thelvan. We're still here. We're not easy to kill. Hannah took over, her military background evident in her precise words. We've also been watching you, Commander. For 63 years, to be exact. Since our first deep space telescopes detected unusual energy signatures from the galactic core. We've had stealth probes in Vakroth space for 4 decades. We know how many ships you have. We know what your weapons can do. We know your fleet movements, your supply lines, your command structure. She smiled. We also know about the 17 rebellions currently active in your empire. The logistics problems in sectors 7 through 12. The fact that your shipyards can't keep up with demand because 3 of your primary manufacturing worlds are experiencing labor unrest. The chamber had gone completely silent. Thelvan's warriors were staring at the humans with something that might have been confusion, or might have been the beginning of fear. No primitive species should know these things. Their intelligence networks were supposed to be impenetrable. Yuki added the final piece, her voice soft but clear. We also hacked your communication network about 8 months ago, Commander. Did you ever wonder why your encrypted military channels kept playing that old Earth song? The one that goes, "We're no strangers to love, you know the rules and so do I." She grinned. We call it getting rickrolled. It's a joke, a very old joke. We wanted to see if you would notice. The response Marcus stepped closer to Thelvan, and despite the massive size difference, it was the human who seemed larger in that moment. Here's what you need to understand about humanity, Commander. We're a young species. We've only been in space for a few centuries. We don't have planet-destroying weapons. We don't have 50,000 worlds. We don't have fleets that can blot out stars. He paused. But we have something you've forgotten if you ever had it at all. We remember what it's like to be afraid. We remember what it's like to face impossible odds. And we learned a long time ago that the only way to survive is to never, ever give up. You're choosing extinction, Thelvan said, but there was uncertainty in his voice now. We're choosing freedom, Hannah corrected. There's a difference. And yes, we might lose. Your fleet is bigger, your weapons more powerful, your empire vast beyond our current ability to challenge. But here's the thing about humans, Commander. Tell us something is impossible, and we'll find a way to do it anyway. Tell us to surrender and we'll fight twice as hard. Give us an enemy that seems unbeatable and we'll figure out where they're weak and hit them there until they fall. David pulled out a small data device. We're transmitting this entire conversation to every human world, Commander. All 17 colonies, Earth, Luna, Mars, the orbital habitats, the research stations. 8 billion people are watching this right now. They've all heard you threaten to burn our worlds, he smiled. You've just made a mistake that bigger empires than yours have made before. You've given humanity a common enemy. You've united us. Before today, we were 17 separate colonies, each with their own governments, goals, and disputes. Now we're one species with one goal: survive you. The line in the sand. Marcus extended his hand toward Thelvan, a human gesture of greeting that the alien commander didn't understand. We appreciate you coming all this way, Commander. We really do. But humanity has to decline your offer. We've got prior commitments. Democracy, self-determination, freedom, those kinds of things. They're important to us. He lowered his hand when it became clear Thelvan wouldn't take it. You have 14 days to leave human space peacefully. After that, we'll consider your presence an act of war. The audacity of the statement hung in the air like smoke. A species that had barely left its own solar system was issuing an ultimatum to an empire that had conquered thousands of worlds. Thelvan should have laughed. Instead, he felt something he had not experienced in centuries of conquest. Doubt. You are fools, he finally said. In 14 days, your colony burns. Then Earth. Then every human world in sequence until you beg for the mercy of submission. We'll be ready, Marcus said simply. The humans turned and walked back down the 40 steps, their backs straight, showing no fear. As they reached the bottom, Elena looked back over her shoulder. One more thing, Commander. You should check your ship's navigation computer when you get a chance. I think you'll find an interesting message there. They were escorted back to their shuttle in silence. As the small human craft pulled away from the massive Vakroth vessel, Thelvan ordered his navigators to check the system. There, buried in code that should have been impossible to hack, was a simple message in English. See you soon. Humanity sends its regards. Humanity prepares. The shuttle ride back to Pathfinder 7 was different from the trip out. Where there had been tension before, now there was grim determination. Marcus immediately opened secure communications with Earth Command. Within an hour, every human military installation, research facility, and colony was on maximum alert. On Earth, General Sarah Chen watched the recording of the alien encounter for the third time. She was the commander of the United Earth Defense Force, a position created 60 years ago when scientists first detected signs of advanced civilizations in the galaxy. People had called the UEDF paranoid, a waste of resources, preparing for threats that might never come. Now those people were very, very quiet. Activate Protocol Nightfall, she ordered. Throughout human space, millions of people received coded messages. Military personnel reported to duty stations. Civilian defense forces mobilized. Engineers began final checks on weapon systems that had been built in secret over decades. Scientists activated research projects that officially didn't exist. On Luna, massive railgun batteries that had been disguised as mining equipment rotated toward the sky. In Earth's orbit, satellites that looked like commercial communication relays opened to reveal missile pods. On Mars, the colony that everyone believed was struggling to become self-sufficient revealed underground factories that had been producing warships for 20 years. In the asteroid belt, mining stations detached from the rocks they were supposedly mining, revealing themselves as mobile weapons platforms. The secret 60 years humanity had been preparing for this moment since 1965, When the Arecibo radio telescope had detected a signal that clearly wasn't natural, the signal had been brief, garbled, impossible to translate, but it had been artificial. Proof that humanity wasn't alone. That proof had changed everything. In secret, the world's governments had formed a coalition. Resources were quietly redirected. The best scientists and engineers were recruited for projects that officially didn't exist. While the public focused on building colonies and expanding into space, a shadow military had been preparing for the day when humanity would meet neighbors who might not be friendly. Dr. Robert Shaw, the chief scientist of Project Nightfall, stood in a command center buried 3 kilometers beneath the Rocky Mountains. Around him, holographic displays showed the positions of every human military asset in the solar system. It was impressive, far more than the Vakroth would be expecting. But would it be enough? "We have 14 days, his assistant, Commander Lisa Park, said. "The Vakroth fleet will need at least 10 days to gather forces and reach Earth. That gives us time to position everything perfectly." Robert nodded, but his expression was troubled. "They have 50,000 worlds worth of resources, Lisa. Even if we win this first battle, what happens next? They'll keep coming. They'll bring more ships, bigger weapons, until they overwhelm us through sheer numbers. Then we make sure they don't want to come back," Lisa said. "We make the price so high that conquering humanity isn't worth the cost." She pulled up tactical displays. "We hit them with everything we have. We show them that every battle with humans will bleed them. We make them afraid." Personal stories on Earth. In a small apartment in Tokyo, a family sat together watching the news. The parents held their children close as reports came in about the alien ultimatum. The father, a construction worker named Kenji, felt his heart hammering in his chest. But when his 8-year-old daughter asked if the bad aliens were going to hurt them, he found himself smiling. "No, sweetheart," he said, surprising himself with how confident he sounded. "Do you remember the story I told you about your great-great-grandmother? How she survived the war when she was little? How she helped rebuild Tokyo when everything was destroyed?" His daughter nodded. "Well, that's what humans do. When things get scary, we don't give up. We fight, we rebuild, we survive. And we're going to survive this too." In New York, an elderly woman named Margaret Chen was being interviewed by reporters outside her apartment building. At 112 years old, she was one of the oldest people on Earth, a survivor of the climate wars, the AI crisis, and 3 different pandemics. When asked if she was afraid of the alien invasion, she laughed. "Honey, I've been afraid before," she said, her voice raspy but strong. "It didn't help then and it won't help now. These aliens think they can scare us into giving up our freedom?" She shook her head. "I've seen humanity face extinction 6 times. We're still here. We're too stubborn to know when we're beaten." The interview went viral within hours, shared across every human world. People found strength in her words and her refusal to be intimidated. If someone who had survived over a century of disasters wasn't afraid, why should they be? The Vakroth perspective aboard the Eternal Conquest. Commander Thelvan reviewed the intelligence reports on humanity with growing confusion. The species was clearly primitive by Imperium standards. They had barely begun to explore their own star system. Their largest weapons were fusion devices that could destroy cities, toys compared to the planet crackers in his fleet. Their ships were slow, their shields weak, their military organization scattered across multiple governments and colonies. By every metric, humanity should have surrendered immediately. They had nothing to gain from resistance and everything to lose. Yet they had laughed. They had issued their own ultimatum. They had shown no fear whatsoever. Sub-Commander Ralvex, Thelvan called to his second-in-command, a veteran of 1,000 conquests. "What do you make of these humans?" Ralvex studied the data with his 4 eyes, each one capable of seeing different spectrums of light simultaneously. "They are either insane or hiding capabilities we have not detected. Their behavior is unprecedented. In my 6 centuries of service to the Imperium, I have never seen a species act this way." "Could they actually pose a threat?" Thelvan asked. "Impossible," Ralvex responded, but there was hesitation in his voice. "They have 17 worlds. We have 50,000. They have perhaps a few hundred military vessels. We have fleets that number in the hundreds of thousands. They have conventional weapons. We have technology that can crack planets, ignite stars, collapse entire solar systems." He paused. "But their confidence troubles me. Species do not laugh in the face of annihilation unless they believe they can survive it." Thelvan magnified the image of Earth on the display. It was a beautiful world, mostly water. with green and brown continents wrapped in white clouds, a pity to destroy it. But the Imperium demanded obedience above all else. If humanity would not submit, they would serve as an example to any other species considering resistance. Begin gathering our forces, Thelvan ordered. I want 500 warships for the initial assault. We will not take chances with these humans. We will overwhelm them so completely that their spirit breaks before the first shot is fired. But even as he gave the order, Thelvan felt the shadow of doubt. He had conquered hundreds of species personally, thousands more under his command. He knew what a defeated species looked like. He knew the stages of resistance, denial, anger, bargaining, acceptance. The humans had skipped all of those stages and gone straight to defiance. It was not natural. It was not logical. It was, he realized, very dangerous. The clock ticks down. The 14 days became 13, then 12, then 10. Across human space, preparations continued at a frantic pace. Families said goodbyes. Soldiers checked their equipment for the 100th time. Scientists ran final simulations. Engineers made last-minute adjustments to weapon systems that had never been tested in actual combat. On Kepler 442b, Marcus Webb stood at the observation window where Elena had been standing when this all began. He thought about his wife and son back on Earth, about the life he had lived, about the future that might end in less than 4 days. But he also thought about humanity, about the long journey from caves to starships, about every obstacle overcome and every challenge met. He remembered a quote from an ancient Earth leader, words spoken during another time of impossible odds. We shall fight on the beaches. We shall fight on the landing grounds. We shall fight in the fields and in the streets. We shall fight in the hills. We shall never surrender. Those words, spoken centuries ago by Winston Churchill, had never been more relevant. Humanity would fight. And if they fell, they would fall standing, not kneeling. The Vakroth were about to learn what every would-be conqueror of humanity had learned throughout history. Humans at their most dangerous are humans who have nothing left to lose and everything to fight for. As Marcus watched Kepler 442b's twin moons rise again, he whispered into the darkness of space, knowing the Vakroth couldn't hear him but saying it anyway. Come on then. Let's see what you've got. The countdown continued. 4 days remained, then 3, then 2. The galaxy held its breath, waiting to see if the impossible would happen, waiting to see if a young species barely out of its own solar system could stand against an empire that had never known defeat, waiting to see if humanity would survive, or if they would become just another cautionary tale, another name added to the list of 50,000 conquered worlds. But one thing was certain, the Vakroth would remember humanity. Whether as a footnote in their history or as the species that taught them fear, humans would not be forgotten. The story was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning. When the Empire learned fear, the war room beneath Geneva's mountains had been built to withstand direct nuclear strikes, antimatter detonation, and even localized gravitational collapse. It had taken 40 years to construct, all in secret, while the world above went about its daily business. Now 73 of humanity's finest military minds filled the chamber, their eyes locked on the massive holographic display dominating the center of the room. General Sarah Chen stood at the display's edge, her fingers dancing through the air as she manipulated fleet positions, defense grids, and weapon deployments. Each icon represented lives, ships, and the hopes of 8 billion people. She had spent her entire adult life preparing for this moment, running simulations, war games, theoretical scenarios. Now it was real, and the weight of it pressed down on her shoulders like a physical thing. The fleet approaches Vakroth fleet entering the Kuiper Belt, announced Lieutenant Commander Jackson from his station. Confirmed count 512 warships. They're not even trying to hide. They're coming straight down the ecliptic plane. Maximum intimidation formation. On the display, the Vakroth fleet appeared as a red mass, spreading across space like a disease. Each ship was larger than anything humanity had built, bristling with weapons that could reduce continents to ash. They moved in perfect formation, a testament to thousands of years of military discipline. They looked unstoppable. Sarah allowed herself a small smile. Looking unstoppable and being unstoppable were two very different things. Position Alpha. Report status, she commanded. Alpha batteries fully charged. General, came the response from Luna Base. All railgun systems operating at optimal capacity. Targeting solutions locked and loaded. We're ready to make some noise. Position Beta. Mars colony reports all coilgun platforms online. Another voice chimed in. The Deimos and Phobos installations are hot and tracking targets. Our pilots are standing by in their fighters, champing at the bit. Position Gamma. Asteroid belt stations confirm weapon systems armed. Reported Commander Park from her position in the Rocky Mountain facility. All 147 mobile platforms have detached and are maneuvering to intercept vectors. The Vekroth won't even see them coming until it's too late. Sarah nodded, satisfaction warming her chest despite the circumstances. 60 years of preparation, trillions of dollars invested, countless lives dedicated to this moment. Humanity had built an invisible fortress around its home system, and now it was time to see if that fortress would hold. Commander Thelvan's confidence aboard the Eternal Conquest. Commander Thelvan watched the primitive human system grow larger in his displays. His 3 eyes tracked the positions of human vessels, counted their defensive installations, and analyzed their pathetic attempts at military preparation. They had perhaps 200 warships scattered throughout the system, most of them barely worthy of the name, converted cargo vessels with weapons bolted to their hulls, small fighter craft that would burn up against Imperium shields like moths against a star. Sub-Commander Ralvex, what are your tactical assessments? Thelvan asked, though he already knew the answer. The humans have positioned most of their fleet between Mars and Earth, Ralvex reported, his 4 eyes scanning multiple data streams simultaneously. A defensive posture as expected. They have some installations on their moon and in their asteroid belt, but nothing that concerns me. Our shields can absorb anything they can throw at us. He paused. However, I recommend caution. Their behavior continues to be unusual. They should be evacuating their worlds, preparing to surrender. Instead, they appear to be preparing for battle. Thelvan dismissed the concern with a wave of his armored hand. They are young and foolish. They do not understand what they face. We have cracked planets with populations in the trillions. We have exterminated civilizations that were building starships when these humans were still living in caves. This will be over in hours, not days. He opened a communication channel to the human fleet. His image would now be appearing on every screen throughout the system, just as the humans had broadcast their defiance to their people. Turnabout, as the humans said, was fair play. Humans of the Sol system, his voice boomed across the void. This is your final opportunity to surrender. Lay down your weapons, power down your defenses, submit to the Vekroth Imperium, and you will be allowed to survive as a vassal species. Resist, and we will show you why 50,000 worlds kneel before us. He leaned forward, his massive form filling the screen. You have one of your hours. Choose wisely. Humanity's response on Earth. In a small broadcast studio in New York, Ambassador Marcus Webb sat in front of a camera. He had returned from Kepler 442b 3 days ago, bringing with him every scrap of intelligence his team had gathered about the Vekroth. Now he would deliver humanity's response not as a government official but as a human being. Commander Thelvan, Marcus began, his voice calm and clear. Thank you for your offer. We've given it careful consideration, discussed it thoroughly, and reached a unanimous decision across all 17 of our worlds. He paused, letting the moment stretch. The answer is no. Not today, not tomorrow, not ever. Humanity does not kneel. And human soldiers, when they boarded disabled Vekroth ships to capture technology and intelligence, fought with a ferocity that shocked the aliens. These weren't professional warriors bred for combat like Vekroth soldiers. These were ordinary people, farmers and teachers and engineers who had taken up weapons to defend their homes. They didn't fight by rules or honor codes. They fought to win, using every trick, every advantage, every bit of terrain and cover they could find. The retreat, sir. We must retreat, Ralvex said aboard the Eternal Conquest. Thelvan's second-in-command had barely survived when his ship was destroyed, beaming to the flagship at the last moment. We cannot win this battle. We need to regroup, bring more forces, develop new tactics. Thelvan wanted to refuse. Every fiber of his being screamed against retreat. The Imperium did not retreat. The Imperium did not lose. But he was looking at a tactical display that showed 60% losses in climbing. Ships that had survived 1,000 battles were being destroyed by a species that had been in space for barely 2 centuries. Signal the fleet, he said, each word feeling like broken glass in his throat. Fall back to the outer system. Defensive formation. The Vekroth fleet, what remained of it, began to withdraw. The human forces pursued, but carefully now, not willing to overextend. They had won the battle, but the war was far from over. General Chen watched the enemy retreat on her displays and felt no elation, only grim satisfaction. They had survived, but the cost had been high. Earth had lost 30% of its orbital infrastructure. Mars colony had taken hits that killed thousands. Luna base had suffered heavy casualties. Human ships, dozens of them, were destroyed or disabled. The victory was real, but it was not clean. The price of victory, in the medical stations throughout the system, doctors and nurses worked frantically to save the wounded. In command centers, analysts reviewed the battle data, learning, adapting, preparing for the next fight. In homes across 17 worlds, families mourned loved ones who would never come home. Captain Jennifer Walsh had been piloting a fighter when a Vakroth destroyer exploded too close. Her ship was caught in the blast, shields failing, hull breaching. She managed to eject, her emergency beacon screaming into the void, but she floated in space for 3 hours before rescue arrived. When they pulled her from her survival pod, she was hypothermic and injured but alive. "Did we win?" she asked the medic who was treating her. "Yeah," the medic said. A young man named David who had been studying to be a doctor when the war started. "Yeah, we won." Jennifer smiled, then passed out. She would wake up in a hospital on Earth 3 days later, missing 2 fingers to frostbite but alive. She would be awarded medals she didn't want and give interviews she didn't care about. But she would always remember those 3 hours floating in the dark, wondering if anyone would find her. And she would always remember that smile when she learned humanity had survived. Commander Thelvan's final message from the outer system. As his battered fleet limped toward the edge of human space, Thelvan sent one final communication to Earth. His image appeared on screens throughout the system, but he looked different now. There was no confidence, no arrogance. There was only a warrior who had learned a terrible lesson. "Humans," he began, and his voice was quiet now, almost respectful. "You have done what no species has done in 8,000 years. You have defeated a Vakroth fleet in open battle. You have earned your independence through blood and courage." He paused. "The Imperium will remember this day. We will remember you." Marcus Webb, watching from Earth, saw something in Thelvan's eyes. Not fear exactly. Respect. Perhaps even admiration. "What you must understand," Thelvan continued, "is that the Imperium will not stop. We cannot. We are defined by conquest, by dominance. If we allow you to remain free, every conquered species will seek the same. Our empire will crumble, so we will return with more ships, more weapons, more soldiers. We will keep coming until you are defeated or we are destroyed. But know this," the alien commander said, and now his voice carried something that might have been warning or might have been advice. "You have changed the galaxy today. Every species under Imperium rule is watching. Every rebellion now has hope. Every resistance group now has a symbol. You cannot stand alone against the might of the Imperium, but you may not have to." The transmission ended. Thelvan's fleet jumped to faster-than-light travel and vanished from human sensors. They were gone, but they would return. Everyone knew it. The question was, would humanity be ready? The new galactic order within days, the news of humanity's victory spread across the galaxy. The Imperium tried to suppress it, to claim it was propaganda, to minimize the scope of their defeat. But the conquered species knew the truth. They had their own communication networks, their own ways of sharing information, and the information they shared was intoxicating. The Imperium could be beaten. The great Vakroth fleet, invincible for 8,000 years, had been driven from a primitive solar system by a species barely capable of interstellar travel. If humanity could do it, why not others? The Krelak system, which had been under Imperium control for 3,000 years, rose in open revolt. The Imperium garrison was overrun in a matter of days. 15 colony worlds in the Outer Rim simultaneously declared independence. Species that had been conscripted into Imperium service began to defect, taking their ships and weapons with them. The empire that Thelvan had warned about, the one that defined itself through conquest and dominance, began to crack. On Earth, General Chen received the first communication from an alien species that wasn't the Vakroth. The Krelak sent a simple message. "We have heard of your victory. We seek alliance. We seek freedom. Will you help us?" Sarah looked at the message for a long time. Humanity had just barely survived one battle. They had taken heavy losses, exhausted resources, and pushed their military to its absolute limit. And now alien species were asking for help, asking humanity to fight not just for itself but for the freedom of others. She thought about her daughter, safe in a shelter during the battle but terrified. She thought about all the children across all the human worlds who had watched the sky and wondered if they would survive the day. She thought about the price of freedom and the cost of peace. Then she thought about what it meant to be human. To see injustice and want to fix it. To see suffering and want to end it. To see someone in chains and want to break those chains. Send a response, she told her communications officer. Tell them we're interested in talking. Tell them we can't promise military support immediately, but we can offer advice, intelligence, support for their resistance movements. Tell them, she paused, choosing her words carefully. Tell them that freedom is worth fighting for, and humanity stands with all species seeking it. The dawn of something new in the weeks that followed. Earth became something it had never been before, a symbol. Human diplomats, led by Marcus Webb, began secret negotiations with resistance groups throughout the galaxy. Human engineers shared defensive technology with species planning rebellions. Human tacticians advised alien resistance fighters on guerrilla warfare, on asymmetric tactics, on all the hard-won lessons from humanity's own history of resistance and revolution. The Imperium would return to human space. Everyone knew that. Thelvan would bring a fleet 10 times larger, 100 times larger, but humanity wouldn't face them alone. Already alliances were forming. Species that had never met were connecting through human intermediaries, sharing resources and information, planning coordinated uprisings. The galactic order that had existed for 8,000 years was changing, and humanity, the youngest species in known space, was at the center of that change. Dr. Elena Vasquez stood at her observation window on Kepler 442b, watching the twin moons rise just as she had been doing when this all started. But everything was different now. The peaceful research station had been fortified, its civilian scientists trained in defensive procedures. Ships patrolled the system, watching for threats. The galaxy had become a more dangerous place, but it had also become a place of hope. She thought about the message that General Chen had sent to the Krelax, the promise of support for species seeking freedom. She thought about the cost of the recent battle, the lives lost, the resources expended, and she thought about what came next, the larger war that was inevitable, the struggle that would define humanity's place in the galaxy. Was it worth it? David Kumar asked, coming to stand beside her. The engineer had chosen to stay on Kepler 442b rather than return to Earth. His expertise needed to maintain the colony's defenses. He stood up, walking toward a window that showed the New York skyline behind him. You've conquered 50,000 worlds, Commander. That's impressive. That's terrifying. That's a legacy of 8,000 years of military dominance. But here's what you don't understand about those 50,000 worlds. They're not yours. You occupy them. You control them through fear and force. But they don't belong to you. They never did. Marcus turned back to the camera. We've been watching those worlds, Commander. We've seen the rebellions. We've intercepted the messages from resistance groups. We know that your empire is held together by terror, not loyalty. And terror only works until someone stands up and says no more. Well, Commander Thelvan, humanity is standing up. And we're not standing alone. Behind him, the broadcast split screen. Images appeared from other human worlds. From Mars, where Governor Chen stood before her colony's main dome. From Luna, where Admiral Rodriguez saluted from the bridge of the UED's Defiance. From Kepler 442b, where Elena Vasquez stood with the entire Pathfinder 7 crew behind her. From orbital habitats, research stations, mining colonies, every human outpost in the system. 17 worlds, 8 billion people speaking with one voice. We're ready, Commander, Marcus said simply. Come and get us, the first shots. The hour expired. Thelvan gave the order. The Vakroth fleet accelerated, weapons powering up with energy signatures that lit up every human sensor in the system. They were not subtle, not careful, not concerned. They were the Imperium, and they had never needed to be afraid. The fleet crossed into the asteroid belt, and that's when everything changed. The asteroids themselves opened fire. What the Vakroth had assumed were simple mining installations revealed themselves as heavily armed weapons platforms. Railguns that had been disguised as ore processing equipment locked onto targets and fired streams of projectiles at relativistic speeds. Coil guns launched missiles that accelerated to impossible velocities. Laser batteries that officially didn't exist burned through the void. Evasive action, Ralvek shouted as the first impact struck their shields. The Vakroth fleet scattered, their perfect formation breaking as hundreds of weapons platforms revealed themselves. These weren't the primitive defenses they had expected. These were military-grade installations that had been built specifically to kill ships exactly like theirs. The first Vakroth destroyer died within 30 seconds, its shields overwhelmed by concentrated fire from 6 different platforms. The ship broke apart in a brilliant explosion that briefly created a second sun in the asteroid belt. Then a second destroyer died. Then a third. Impossible, Thelvin roared. They're primitives. They shouldn't have weapons like this. But they did. Because humanity had been watching, learning, studying Vakroth technology from the thousands of probe observations over decades. Human scientists had reverse-engineered what they could, invented what they couldn't, and built weapons specifically designed to counter Imperium advantages. The trap springs fully, as the Vakroth fleet pushed through the asteroid belt. Taking losses but pressing forward through sheer numbers, they entered the inner system. That's when Luna opened fire. The moon's surface erupted with light as massive electromagnetic railguns launched projectiles the size of buses. These weren't explosive weapons. They didn't need to be. At the speeds they traveled, simple kinetic energy was enough to punch through shields and hull alike. One shot hit a Vakroth cruiser dead center, the projectile passing completely through the ship and out the other side, leaving a perfectly circular hole through which atmosphere and crew were sucked into space. All batteries fire at will, Admiral Rodriguez commanded from Luna Base. Around him, operators worked frantically at their stations, tracking targets, calculating trajectories, compensating for the incredible speeds at which both they and their targets were moving. They had trained for this, simulated it thousands of times. Now it was real, and their training showed. From Mars, Governor Chen watched her own coil gun platforms launch their opening salvos. The weapons were based on technology humanity had developed for peaceful purposes, electromagnetic mass drivers designed to launch cargo into orbit cheaply and efficiently. It turned out the same technology that could launch cargo could launch explosive projectiles with devastating accuracy. Target the command ships, she ordered. Make them feel it. Throughout the system, human fighters launched from hidden bays. They were small, fast, and operated by pilots who had grown up in space, who understood three-dimensional combat in a way the Vakroth, with their rigid military doctrine, never had. The fighters swarmed the larger Vakroth ships like insects, too small and too fast to target easily, but each carrying weapons that could damage critical systems with precise hits. The psychological war, but humanity's secret weapon, wasn't just technology. It was psychology. While the Vakroth fleet fought to push through the human defenses, their communication systems were being hacked. Again, not to steal information this time, but to deliver a message. Suddenly, every screen on every Vakroth ship showed the same thing. Footage from their own conquered worlds. Rebellions, uprisings, resistance groups celebrating as news of the battle spread. Species that had been conquered for centuries suddenly seeing hope, seeing that the mighty Imperium could bleed. The Krelak system is in open revolt, one report showed. The Imperium garrison has been overrun. 15 colonies in the Outer Rim have declared independence. Fleet assets in Sector 7 are reporting mutinies among conscripted species. The messages kept coming, each one carefully crafted to show the Vakroth exactly what their defeat would mean. The empire they had built over 8,000 years was beginning to crack, all because a primitive species had dared to say no. Thelvan watched the reports with growing horror. This wasn't just a military defeat. This was the beginning of the end of everything the Imperium represented. If humanity won, if they actually defeated a Vakroth fleet, the message would spread across the entire galaxy. Resistance was possible. The Imperium could be beaten. All ships maximum offensive, he commanded. Forget defensive formations. Forget casualties. We must crush these humans before this goes any further. The turning point. The Vakroth fleet surged forward in a desperate charge, abandoning tactics for raw aggression. They lost ships by the dozen, but they pushed through. They were going to reach Earth, and they were going to burn it to ash. Nothing else mattered now. That's when Earth's orbital defenses revealed themselves. What had appeared to be thousands of civilian satellites suddenly transformed. Solar panels folded away to reveal missile pods. Communication arrays rotated to show laser batteries. Weather monitoring stations opened to deploy railguns. The entire orbital infrastructure of Earth, built over 2 centuries, had been weaponized in secret. Fire, General Chen said quietly. The sky around Earth lit up like a second asteroid belt, thousands of weapons firing simultaneously. A sphere of destruction that the Vakroth fleet flew directly into. Ships died by the dozens, then by the hundreds. The Vakroth shields, designed to withstand planet-cracker weapons, were overwhelmed by the sheer volume of fire. It wasn't that each individual weapon was particularly powerful, it was that there were so many of them, firing from every angle, creating a killing field that nothing could survive. Commander Ralvex's ship exploded, taking 300 years of military experience with it. Admiral Krevelin's flagship, the Pride of Conquest, was cut in half by a sustained laser barrage. Ship after ship died, and those that survived found themselves harried by human fighters, their systems hacked by AI that adapted faster than Vakroth computers could counter, their sensors jammed by technology that shouldn't exist. "Sir, we've lost 60% of the fleet," an officer reported to Thelvan, his voice breaking with panic. "Our shields can't hold against this volume of fire. They're everywhere. They're hitting us from every direction." Thelvan stared at the tactical display in disbelief. This was impossible. They were the Imperium. They had never lost. They could not lose. But the display told a different story. It told the story of an empire's first defeat in 8,000 years. The human advantage, what Thelvan didn't understand, what the Imperium had never learned, was that their very success had made them weak. 8,000 years of victories had taught them that their way was the only way. Their tactics, their formations, their strategies had not changed significantly in millennia because they had never needed to change. Humanity had no such luxury. Humanity had spent its entire existence fighting itself, developing new tactics, new strategies, new ways of warfare. World War I's trench warfare had been replaced by World War II's mobile tactics. Those had evolved into Cold War nuclear strategy, which had transformed into information warfare, then cyber warfare, then AI warfare. Humans had been forced to innovate constantly just to survive each other. Now, facing an alien threat, all that accumulated knowledge came into play. Human fighters didn't fly in formation like the Vakroth did. They swarmed, coordinated through AI systems, but with human intuition, making split-second decisions that no programmed response could match. Human weapon systems didn't fire in predictable patterns. They adapted, learned, changed tactics on the fly. Elena considered the question. "We could have surrendered," she said slowly. "We could have accepted Thelvan's ultimatum, become a vassal species, preserved our lives at the cost of our freedom. Millions of people would still be alive. Our worlds would be intact. Everything would be," she searched for the word, "easier." "But," David prompted. "But we wouldn't be human anymore," Elena finished. "Not really. Humanity isn't defined by our biology or our technology or our worlds. We're defined by our refusal to give up, our insistence on freedom, our stubborn belief that we can change things that seem unchangeable." She smiled. The Vakroth didn't understand that. They thought they were conquering another primitive species. They didn't realize they were waking something up. David nodded slowly. "So what happens now?" "Now?" Elena laughed, a sound that held exhaustion and determination in equal measure. "Now we prepare. The Imperium will come again, stronger and angrier. But they'll find us ready, and they'll find that we're not alone anymore. They woke humanity up, David. That was their first mistake. Their second mistake will be coming back." The final message that night, transmissions went out from Earth to every corner of human space and beyond. Not official government communications or military orders, but something simpler and more powerful. A message from humanity to the galaxy. It was compiled from thousands of individual messages, from soldiers and civilians, from young and old, from Earth and its colonies. It was spoken in hundreds of languages, transmitted on every frequency, sent to every corner of space where it might be received. The core message was simple. We are humanity. We are young. We are inexperienced. We do not have the largest fleets or the most powerful weapons. We cannot promise we will win every battle or survive every war. But we can promise this. We will never stop fighting for freedom. We will never surrender to tyranny. We will stand with any species, any people, any civilization that shares our values of liberty and self-determination. The Vakroth Imperium promised to crush us. They promised to burn our worlds. They promised that resistance was futile. They were wrong. Not because we're stronger than them, not because we have better weapons, but because they fundamentally misunderstood what drives us. They thought we would break. They thought we would kneel. They thought fear would be enough. They learned a lesson that every would-be conqueror of humanity has learned throughout our history. Humans are at our most dangerous when someone threatens our home, our freedom, our right to choose our own destiny. Tell us something is impossible, and we'll find a way to do it anyway. Tell us to surrender, and we'll fight twice as hard. Give us an enemy that seems unbeatable, and we'll figure out where they're weak and hit them there until they fall. To the conquered species watching this message, you are not alone. Resistance is possible. Freedom is achievable. The Imperium wants you to believe they're eternal, unchangeable, inevitable. They're not. They're just another empire. Like all the empires before them, built on force and fear. And like all such empires, they can fall. To the Vakroth Imperium, we do not hate you. We do not seek your destruction, but we will not submit. Not today, not tomorrow, not ever. You have a choice. You can keep coming, keep fighting, keep losing ships and soldiers in a war you cannot win, or you can change. You can learn that conquest is not the only way, that cooperation is stronger than domination, that a galaxy of free peoples is richer and more powerful than an empire of slaves. The choice is yours. But know this, humanity stands ready. We have survived ice ages and plagues. We have survived nuclear war and climate collapse. We have survived every disaster our own ingenuity could create, and every challenge the universe has thrown at us. We will survive you too. And when this is over, when the fighting finally ends and the dust settles, we will still be here, standing, free, human. The message ended. Across the galaxy, countless beings heard it. Some dismissed it as propaganda. Some laughed at its audacity. But many, so very many, heard it and felt something they hadn't felt in years, in generations, in centuries. They felt hope. On Earth, in the command center buried beneath the mountains, General Sarah Chen watched the message broadcast one final time. Then she turned to her staff, to the men and women who had fought so hard to give humanity this chance. "All right, people," she said, her voice tired but determined. "We won the first battle. Now we prepare for the next one. The Imperium won't make the same mistakes twice. So we need to be better, faster, smarter. We need to turn our alliances into real military partnerships. We need to share our technology and learn from theirs. We need to build not just a defense of humanity, but a defense of freedom itself." She looked around the room, meeting each person's eyes. "It's going to be hard. It's going to cost us. Some of us won't survive what's coming. But we're human. Hard is what we do, so let's get to work." They did. As the galaxy watched and wondered, as the Imperium regrouped and plotted, as newly freed species took their first tentative steps toward independence, humanity prepared. They built ships and trained soldiers. They forged alliances and shared knowledge. They turned their solar system into a fortress and extended their reach to the stars beyond. The Vakroth would return. Everyone knew it. The war was far from over. But when they came back, they would find something they had never encountered before. A galaxy that was learning to fight back, led by a species too stubborn to know when they were beaten. Commander Thelvan had been right about one thing. Humanity had changed the galaxy. They had shown that the impossible was possible, that the invincible could be defeated, that freedom was worth any price. The Imperium had promised to crush Earth. Humanity couldn't stop laughing. Not because they thought it was funny, but because they knew something the Imperium didn't. The hardest thing in the universe to crush is a human who has decided they won't be crushed. The war had begun. And this was just the first chapter of a story that would echo across the galaxy for generations to come. A story of courage and sacrifice, of freedom and determination, of a young species that looked at 8,000 years of conquest and said simply, no. It was, in the end, the most human thing possible.